Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, often called AOC by many people, was invited to a very special event. This was not just any event. It was a big, fancy diplomatic gathering held in a beautiful palace. The palace was full of important people from all over the world. There were kings, queens, diplomats, politicians, and many royal guards standing quietly to protect the guests. The walls were decorated with gold and paintings, and the air smelled like fresh flowers mixed with the soft scent of fine perfume. The floor was made of shiny marble, and the chandeliers sparkled like stars hanging from the ceiling. Alexandria was excited but also a little nervous. She had traveled many times before, but this was one of the biggest events she had ever attended. She wore a simple but elegant dress. As she walked through the grand halls, she noticed many people talking in different languages, shaking hands, and taking pictures. Everyone seemed polite and careful, but there was also a strong feeling of seriousness in the air. This was a place where important decisions were made and where respect was expected. Among the many people at the event, Alexandria's eyes caught something interesting. Standing near one of the large doors was a tall man in a dark uniform. He was a royal guard. His job was to protect the royal family and keep the palace safe. The guard stood very straight and still. His face showed no emotion, no smile, no frown, just calm silence. His eyes, however, were sharp and watchful. He seemed to be aware of everything happening around him, but did not speak or move unless needed. Alexandria found herself drawn to the guard's calm presence. She thought about how different he was from most people she met. Usually when she talked to someone, there was always some reaction, a smile, a nod, or even a quick reply. But this man said nothing. He didn't even blink much. It was as if he was part of the palace itself, a statue made of flesh and blood. Curious, Alexandria decided to approach him. She wanted to see if he would respond to her. She walked up slowly, careful not to seem rude or disrespectful. When she got closer, she smiled politely and said, "Why don't you ever say anything? Don't you get bored standing here so quietly all day?" Her voice was friendly but playful. She wanted to lighten the mood, to maybe get a small reaction from the silent guard. The guard looked at her but did not answer. His eyes stayed steady on her face, showing no surprise or annoyance. He remained silent. Alexandria waited, hoping for some kind of answer. Maybe a small comment, a simple nod, or even a brief smile. But there was nothing, only silence. Around them, some people began to notice the small scene. Whispers started. Some guests wondered why the guard did not speak. Others looked at Alexandria with curiosity. She was known for being bold and outspoken, but this was a different kind of situation. The palace was a place of tradition and respect. Maybe she had crossed a line by teasing a royal guard. Alexandria felt the silence growing heavier. At first, it was just a few seconds. Then it stretched longer and longer. She looked at the guard's face again. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. His eyes were calm but strong. She realized this was not a man who would be easily shaken or impressed. His silence was a kind of strength. She started to feel a little unsure of herself. What if her words had been disrespectful? What if the guard was not someone to joke with? The mood around her changed. The people nearby stopped whispering and watched closely. The room felt quieter. The silence lasted a full 47 seconds. For Alexandria, it felt much longer. She wanted to say something else, to break the silence. But she was afraid to be the first to speak again. It was as if the guard's quiet presence held the entire room in a pause. Inside, Alexandria's mind raced. She thought about all the times she had spoken quickly, making jokes or comments without thinking too much. Here in this moment, she learned something new. Sometimes, silence is not empty. Sometimes, silence is a powerful message. She slowly stepped back, realizing she had underestimated the guard. He was not just a man standing quietly. He was someone who carried respect and strength in his silence. Alexandria looked around and saw the eyes of others on her. Some were impressed by the guard's calmness. Others looked at her with respect for her courage to speak up, even if it was a risky moment. The event went on. But Alexandria could not forget that brief meeting. It stayed with her like a small secret. She wondered what the guard might say if he ever chose to speak. Would his words be as strong as his silence? This moment marked a turning point for Alexandria. She understood that power is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it is quiet and steady, like the royal guard standing firm in his place. Later, she shared the story with her close friends and advisors. They talked about how important it is to listen and to respect silence. They agreed that sometimes the most meaningful messages come without words. And so, the young politician left the palace that night thinking about the lessons learned from a silent man, a lesson about patience, respect, and strength that would stay with her forever. After the quiet moment with the royal guard, Alexandria's mind was full of questions. She kept thinking about the silence and the strong way the guard had held himself. It was unusual for her. Normally, when she spoke to people, she expected an answer, a reaction, or even a debate. But this man was different. Silence was like a wall, strong and steady, made her curious and also a little uncomfortable. The event continued around. Important conversations filled the grand rooms. People talked about politics, trade, and friendship between countries. Some guests laughed softly, while others spoke in low, serious tones. Alexandria tried to focus on these talks, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the guard. She found a quiet corner of the palace to catch her breath and think. The crowd was big, and the noise of chatter felt far away. To check messages, but nothing seemed as important as what had just happened. She thought about how she had tried to tease the guard to get a smile or a quick reply. Instead, she got silence. That silence felt like a challenge, something she was not used to. Alexandria realized that the royal guard's silence was not a mistake or a problem. It was a choice. He chose not to speak. He chose to hold back his words. She began to wonder why. Was it respect? Was it discipline? Or was there something else behind that quiet look? The palace staff came by and handed Alexandria some refreshments. She thanked them politely but barely touched the food. Her mind was busy. Feeling grew inside her, a mix of respect and humility. She understood that this man was part of a tradition that was older than anything she had seen before. The royal guard was trained to protect, to stay calm, and to be strong without words. Suddenly, a young assistant came to Alexandria and whispered that the monarch was about to make a speech. The crowd started to gather near the main hall. Alexandria moved with the group, curious to hear what the leader would say. The room was filled with quiet expectation. As the monarch began to speak, Alexandria glanced again at the royal guard. He was still standing tall and silent near the entrance. Eyes watched carefully, but he said nothing. Alexandria noticed that many people in the room respected the guard, not only because he was strong, but also because he understood his role perfectly. The monarch's speech was about peace and cooperation between nations. It was a hopeful message. In a world full of challenges, people applauded politely when the speech ended. Alexandria joined in the applause but kept thinking about the guard's silence. It was clear to her that sometimes listening and watching were more powerful than speaking. After the speech, Alexandria found herself near the royal guard again. This time, she did not say anything at first. She just looked at him quietly. The guard met her gaze, but remained calm and still. It was as if they were sharing a moment of understanding without words. Finally, Alexandria spoke softly. I was wrong to mock your silence earlier. It takes strength to stay quiet when everyone expects you to talk.
The guard gave
a small nod, almost like a thank you. His silence was not empty after all. It was full of meaning. Around them, the guests began to mingle and move to other parts of the palace. Some went to the garden, others to the dining room. Alexandria decided to stay a little longer. She wanted to learn more about the people who worked behind the scenes, like the royal guard. She asked a palace official about him. The official smiled and said, "He is one of the best. Quiet, strong, and loyal. He has served the royal family for many years. His silence is part of his duty." It helps him stay alert and ready for anything. Alexandria listened carefully. She realized that the guard's silence was a skill, not a weakness. As the evening went on, Alexandria spoke with other guests and learned about the history of the palace and the royal family. She heard stories of courage, patience, and respect that were passed down through generations. Each story made her think about the power of calmness and control. Later, Alexandria's advisors came to find her. They told her that many reporters and guests were talking about the brief moment with the guard. Some praised her for her honesty and openness. Others were curious about the guard's calm strength. The story was quickly becoming a topic of discussion beyond the palace walls. Alexandria felt both proud and thoughtful. She knew that in politics and life, words were important, but sometimes actions and silence spoke louder. She made a mental note to be more mindful about how she used her voice and how she listened to others. That night, as Alexandria rested in her hotel room, she thought deeply about the encounter. She remembered the exact moment she tried to get a reaction from the guard and how the silence stretched on. It was not just silence. It was a message. It's a message about patience, respect, and quiet strength. She also thought about how often people rush to speak without listening. How many times had she done the same? The guard's silence was a reminder that sometimes waiting and watching can teach us more than words ever could. Before going to sleep, Alexandria wrote a note in her journal. She wrote about the power of silence and the strength it took to remain calm in a noisy world. She promised herself to remember this lesson and to carry it forward in her work and in her life in the days that followed. The story of the royal guard's silence and the brief exchange with Alexandria spread across social media and news outlets. People admired the guard's quiet dignity and the politician's willingness to admit her mistake. The event became a symbol of respect between two very different kinds of strength. Alexandria's experience reminded many that true power often comes not from shouting or mocking, but from understanding and listening. The royal guard had shown that with just silence. He could hold a room and leave a lasting impression. For Alexandria, this lesson stayed with her. It changed the way she thought about conversations, disagreements, and respect. Now she learned that sometimes the best response is not to speak, but to hold still and let your presence say everything. The moment of silence between Alexandria and the royal guard continued to echo in her mind. She could not stop thinking about it. She wondered what the guard might say if he chose to speak. Would his words be gentle or strong? Would they be kind or sharp? She was curious, but also a bit nervous. The event at the palace was still going on, and people moved from one room to another. Alexandria felt a mixture of excitement and calm. She noticed that some guests kept glancing at the guard, whispering quietly to each other. It was clear that many people respected him deeply. He was more than just a man in uniform. He was a symbol of strength and silence. Suddenly, the royal guard stepped forward. The crowd's chatter softened as people sensed something important was about to happen. Alexandria watched closely. Her heart beat a little faster. Everyone waited for the guard to speak. He took a deep breath and then spoke one clear sentence. His voice was calm and steady, but it carried a weight that filled the entire room. The sentence was simple but powerful. It said more than words usually could. The guard's words told a story of respect, patience, and understanding. It was a message that touched everyone's hearts. Alexandria listened carefully. At first, she was surprised by the calm confidence in his voice. Then, slowly, she understood the true meaning behind his words. The guard was not just answering her question, he was teaching a lesson. His sentence reminded everyone that silence is sometimes stronger than speech. It showed that respect can be given without many words. The crowd around them fell silent. Some people nodded quietly. Others smiled in agreement.
Alexandria felt a warm feeling inside.
She realized that the guard's single sentence had a deep meaning, one that could change how people think about communication and respect. After the guard finished speaking, Alexandria took a moment to gather her thoughts. She felt thankful that he had chosen to respond with kindness and wisdom. It was clear to her that this was a man who had learned the power of patience and control. The royal guard's words also made Alexandria think about herself. She remembered the times she had spoken quickly, without listening carefully. She thought about how often people judge others without understanding their silence. The guard's sentence was a reminder that listening is just as important as speaking. The guests around them began to applaud softly. The royal guard gave a small nod and stepped back into his place by the door. His calm presence returned, but now it felt even stronger. Alexandria looked at him with new respect. Later, as Alexandria walked through the palace gardens, she shared the moment with her close friends and advisors. They talked about the importance of silence and the lessons they could learn from the royal guard. Everyone agreed that the guard's words had been powerful and meaningful. Alexandria felt inspired. She knew that this experience would stay with her for a long time. It had taught her that sometimes the best way to communicate is not with many words, but with thoughtful silence and a few carefully chosen sentences. The story of the guard's one sentence spread quickly. People in the media talked about it, sharing how a simple act of silence followed by a wise sentence could make such a strong impact. Many said it was a reminder that true strength is found in self-control and respect. For Alexandria, this lesson was more than just words. It was a new way of seeing the world. She decided to practice more patience and listening in her work and personal life. She wanted to be someone who could speak with kindness and wisdom, like the royal guard. The experience also changed how she thought about leadership. She realized that a good leader must sometimes listen more and speak less. Silence can give space for others to share their thoughts and feelings. It can build trust and respect. Days passed, and Alexandria kept thinking about the royal guard's sentence. She wrote about it in her journal and shared the story with people she trusted. Her friends said it was a beautiful example of how powerful words and silence can be when used well. The royal guard continued his duties, standing quietly but proudly in the palace halls. He probably did not know how much his simple sentence had affected so many people. But that was the nature of true strength, quiet, humble, and without need for attention. Alexandria felt lucky to have witnessed that moment. It reminded her that sometimes the biggest lessons come from the smallest moments, and sometimes one sentence spoken with respect and calmness can change the way people see the world. She carried this lesson with her as she returned to her work. Feeling stronger and wiser, the royal guard's calm voice and powerful sentence had left a mark on her heart, a mark of respect, patience, and the power of silence. After the royal guard's powerful sentence, the atmosphere in the palace changed. The guests felt a quiet respect for both the guard and Alexandria. The moment was no longer just about a joke or a tease. It had become something deeper. Alexandria knew this experience was important. She wanted to understand its full meaning. As the evening went on, Alexandria found a chance to sit down with her close team. They gathered in a small room away from the noise of the main event. Alexandria shared how the royal guard's silence and his one sentence had affected her. She spoke about how it made her think about patience, respect, and the power of listening. Her advisors listened carefully. They could see that Alexandria had learned something valuable. One advisor said, "Sometimes when we rush to speak, we miss the chance to learn. Silence can teach us more than words." Another agreed, "Respect is shown in many ways. Not all of them need to be loud." Alexandria nodded. She thought about the many times she had spoken quickly, sometimes too quickly. She realized that she could be better at listening, really listening to others. She promised herself that she would try to be more patient and thoughtful in the future. News about the incident started to spread. Reporters outside the palace began asking questions about the exchange between Alexandria and the royal guard. Many were curious about the guard's calm strength and the meaning behind his words. Some wrote stories praising the guard for his wisdom and the powerful lesson he gave. Alexandria decided to speak openly about the moment. In an interview, she said, "I learned a lot from the royal guard. His silence showed me the value of patience and respect. Sometimes we need to stop talking and start listening." Her words were sincere and humble. People admired her honesty. The story of the royal guard in Alexandria became a symbol for many. It reminded people that power does not always come from speaking loudly or being the center of attention. True power can come from calmness, strength, respect for others. In the days that followed, Alexandria received messages from supporters and strangers alike. Many thanked her for sharing the lessons she learned. Some said they had also experienced moments where silence taught them more than words ever could. At the palace, the royal guard continued his duties quietly, did not seek fame or recognition. To him, his work was a duty and an honor. But unknowingly, his simple act of silence and his one sentence had inspired many people. Alexandria often thought about that night. She remembered the guard's steady eyes and the way he spoke with quiet confidence. It made her want to be a better listener and a more thoughtful leader. She started to practice silence more in her daily life. Instead of rushing to respond, she took time to think and listen. She found that this helped her understand others better and make wiser decisions. Her friends and colleagues noticed the change. They said Alexandria seemed calmer and more patient. She was still bold and strong, but also more thoughtful. The lesson from the royal guard had made a real difference. Alexandria also began to share this lesson with younger people and those who looked up to her. She spoke about the importance of respect, patience, and listening in every conversation. She encouraged others to find strength in silence and to think carefully before speaking. This simple story became a guide for many who wanted to improve their communication and relationships. It showed that sometimes the best way to respond is not with many words, but with a single, thoughtful sentence, or even with silence. As time passed, Alexandria and the royal guard never met again in person. But the memory of that night stayed, with both of them in different ways. For Alexandria, it was a moment of growth and understanding. For the royal guard, it was another day of quiet service and strength. Their brief encounter became a reminder to the world: respect and power can be found in the quiet moments between words. Sometimes, those moments speak the loudest. After the royal guard's powerful sentence and the events that followed, Alexandria carried a new understanding with her. The lesson about silence and strength became a part of who she was. It shaped how she spoke to people, how she led, and even how she thought about challenges. Back in her daily life, Alexandria noticed that many situations called for patience and quiet reflection. Sometimes people around her spoke loudly to be heard, but she learned that listening was just as important. She tried to remind herself that not every moment needed words. Sometimes being calm and thoughtful made a bigger difference. As Alexandria shared her story with others, many people felt inspired. They realized that strength does not always mean speaking the most or being the loudest. True strength can come from being steady and respectful. Even when the world feels noisy and rushed, Alexandria also thought about the royal guard and the quiet power he showed. She wondered about his life, his duties, and how he managed to stay so calm in the middle of such important events. She knew that his silence was a skill earned from years of discipline and respect. It was a reminder that some people carry strength quietly, without seeking attention or praise. The story spread beyond the palace walls. Many people talked about the moment when silence spoke louder than words. Schools, workplaces, and communities used the story to teach about respect, patience, and good communication. It became a symbol of how small actions can lead to big lessons. Alexandria continued to grow as a leader. She focused on listening carefully to the people she served. She learned to speak with kindness and wisdom, choosing her words thoughtfully. She believed that by listening first, she could understand better and help more. At times, Alexandria still faced challenges. Being patient and calm was not always easy, especially when dealing with difficult issues. But she remembered the royal guard's example. She knew that true power was in staying steady, even when things felt uncertain. The royal guard remained at his post, doing his work quietly and faithfully. He may never have known how much his simple sentence had changed someone's life. But that was the nature of true humility, serving without needing. Recognition. Alexandria's experience showed the world that respect and power come in many forms. Sometimes a single sentence can change hearts and minds. Sometimes silence can speak the loudest in the end. The story of Alexandria and the royal guard became more than just a moment at a palace event. It became a lesson for all who heard it. A lesson about patience, respect, strength, and the power of listening. And for Alexandria, it was a reminder that sometimes the greatest leaders are those who know when to speak and when to listen, who understand that silence can be the strongest voice of all.